Welcome to another edition of Big Ten Spotlight. He is Deon Thomas, the all-time leading scorer for the Illinois Fighting Illini, and I am Aaron York, the all-time leader in, I can't say getting frustrated, I can't say crying about Penn State basketball, because Penn State basketball had a thrilling win. So I'm just Aaron York. I'm happy. And we are happy to be talking about Big Ten basketball after a thrilling weekend. What was your favorite part of that last weekend? We had some great games, Deon.
Well, first of all, let me say this. You are Aaron York. I mean, you're like James Bond. So
wow.
Take that, hold it, run with it, big fella, because you are that guy. What the young folks say, I am him.
That's yes, what you that are. Is what they say. I've heard that before.
You are him. You are Aaron York. So
the rest Thank you, Deon.
Big fella. But no, I mean, it's just been a great week of basketball. I mean, if you take a look back over everything that has taken place, I mean, you had I wouldn't say some big games yesterday, but you had some games the other day and that have gone on. But you know, I came back after covering the Tennessee-Illinois game, which turned out to be, you know, let's just be quite honest, a really doggone good game. And, you know, if your horses are clicking at the right time, and this is why we played this game, if your horses are running in this race, they have to play better. Let's just be honest. You know, Terrence Shannon, although he finished with 20-plus points, didn't have a great game or the game that he's used to having, so he didn't play very well. Marcus Damask came off, definitely didn't play the way he played the last game. He had 33 before that and really didn't do a whole lot in this past game. But you had a really good game from Quincy Guerre, who played really well. You know, you had Auburn go, you know, and maybe you don't know, you're too young, but I am not a Bruce Pearl fan. And you can go back and read the history. Any Illinois people that are listening to this will know. Maybe even a few Iowa people may remember that story. But sad to see Indiana go down to Auburn, especially the way they did. Auburn put a foot to their butt. But I will say this, Bruce is a good coach, so this is not a surprise. It's just maybe the size of the loss, and then, of course, losing like that at home, 104-76. Purdue did their thing up in Canada against a really good Alabama team. And, you know, we were talking, and we had a little thing, you know, previous conversations you and I had. We talked about who is Minnesota, you know, and Minnesota showed a little bit of mettle, you know, dropping a 20-point loss on FGCU. So, you know, really kind of mixed bag of what basketball looked like this weekend, but you still got to take your hat off to Purdue. They continue to show themselves as a high-level team and doing their thing. And then you got Northwestern, who has been a surprise, who knocked off that Purdue team, you know, putting a foot in Detroit, you know, the University of Detroit. Another team we talked about, your Cornhuskers. Oh,
wow.
Sparty is in some trouble, man. We might have to talk about that later on when we do.
Yes, we're definitely going to have to talk about because that is one of the biggest stories in the conference.
Yes.
And you don't want to take away from Nebraska. And they got done without Josiah Alec. He missed the game with an ankle injury, and they got the big home win against Michigan State. But, of course, everyone's going to want to know about the marquee team. The first story is going to be what's wrong with Michigan State? When is Michigan State going to get going? They came in with such high expectations.
Yeah, top 10 ranked. I mean, come on. And then,
they're not top. They're definitely not top 10 right now.
Yeah, shoot, they barely bottom 5, top 10, bottom 10
so
right now.
They're in a battle to be top 10 in the Big Ten Conference.
It is ugly. And then, you know, Purdue, of course, lost that first game against Northwestern, came back and battled the Hawkeyes and gave it to them. Then the Hawkeyes at home get Michigan. Another team that we questioned, we didn't know who are they, what are they going to be like. Michigan goes over to Iowa City and just lays the smackdown on Iowa.
Yes.
I mean, so you asked what was the fave? I guess if I had to look at a favorite, it definitely wasn't a loss for my Fighting the Line. I'm not gonna. This is a Big Ten centric podcast, so I am not going to harp on that. It has to be the Purdue win over Alabama. That is a very impressive win. Alabama is a very good team. We're going to talk kind of conference rankings here later on. But they're one of those teams that you're going to look at in that SEC because they're not just a football school anymore. Alabama's playing pretty good, but you got to take your hat off to big Zach Edey and Purdue Boilermakers.
Yeah, that was my favorite game of the weekend. That was the most thrilling game maybe in all of college basketball. There were points scored all over the place. We got to see Mark Sears just drop three after three on Purdue, and Purdue able to withstand it. Yes. And you had crazy lead changes. You had Alabama up by 9 in the second half, and then Purdue swung it so that they were up by 9. Then Alabama took the lead back, and then Purdue finally able to close it out. Maybe Braden Smith's best game of his career. I believe he had a career high 27 points to go with 8 assists and 5 rebounds. And as we get into ranking the Big Ten against the other conferences, we have to think about what the ceiling for this Purdue team is if Braden Smith can take that step. And if anyone's going to take that step on this Purdue team, I think it's going to be him, where he could be the second star player that opponents have to worry about, as well as Zach Edey. If he can play like this and score like he did against Alabama consistently, then it is there. Purdue's going to be a big problem on a national level and really reach that national title contender status that we talked about them being at the start of the season.
Well, no, I mean he's already anyone, and anyone that's watched Big Ten basketball understand he and Smith and Lawyer, that is, when they came in as freshmen. I mean, they came in highly touted for that Purdue Boilermaker team, and people kind of was, hey, man, how you going to do? And, you hear coaches all the time. I've used it myself when I coach. The best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores. Now, both of these guys are sophomores, and you talk about them stepping up their games. They have been able to pivot off one another, along with Zach Edey, to really be that 1, 2, and 3 punch for this Purdue team. But one of the greatest things about Purdue that no one talks about is Purdue's defense. This is a solid defensive team. They're always in their help positions in the correct places. They're not going to overwhelm you like some of the teams with traps or mixing up defenses or things of that nature. They always play solid defense. They're in help position. It's kind of a pack line type defense where they're defending the 3-point line and just trying to make you take difficult shots. And if you do get past one of those guys, then you got to deal with 7 foot plus, 300 plus Zach Edey in there. He can block shots without actually touching the ball, just because he changes shots when he comes over to help. But that team's for real. Purdue's for real. And I think they're right now, as we're going to go talk about this later, is the cream of the crop in the Big Ten. Even though they are not ranked number 1 in the Big Ten right now, I still think that they are the cream of the crop. But, we talked about conferences. This is where we are today. So, Aaron, AY, I put to you, best conference in college basketball is?
I think it's the Big 12. I think the Big 12 has been at the top the last 2 or 3 years. And
I'm a little offended when you put that 3 years in there. 1 or 2, the last 1 or 2, maybe 3. Come on, AY.
No, maybe I'll look. I'm gonna have to look back 3 years. Yeah. Maybe I jumped the gun with 3 years. So
okay, I'll give you 2
back
for sure.
to 2002. They had Kansas and Baylor in 2022. They had Kansas and Baylor as number 1 seeds.
Well, no, and I'm not looking at where they were seated during the tournament. I like to look at when I say the best conference, right? I look at the conference as a whole. I'm not looking at say, the top of the conference where you may have
top's a big part of it.
Yeah, well, you got like
2
teams that are the very best and 2 of the best in the country, and then you get down to 3, 4, 5, and 6, and they're nowhere to be seen. But I do have to agree with you this year, though. The Big 12 has 6 teams rated in the Ken Palm top 25. a lot of people may say, well, yeah, analytics, da, 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 da. I think Ken Palm and the Pomeroy ratings are, and I'm not even an analytics guy. I'm an old school guy. The eye test. That's the kind of guy I am. You're young, so you're probably an analytics guy. So I'll give that part to you.
I used to be more of an analytics guy, and then they got a little out of control.
Oh, yeah, they're way out of control, but that's okay. But they, even as a coach, I would use the Pomeroy rankings.
Yeah, especially with
a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, our view of these conferences is so limited by head-to-head matchups, so that we have seen a lot of Tennessee, we've seen some Alabama, but for the Big 12, we haven't seen a lot of these teams play Big 10 teams. So, yeah, you need numbers. You need big sites like Ken Palm to compare. It's definitely a helpful tool.
And I think for this one, which is where I got a lot of my info from, because he delved so deep, they delved so deep into the numbers. 6 teams in the Big 12 in the top 25. Got to give it to them. Got to take your hat off. They are the top team in the top conference in the country right now, because they have multiple teams that are doing it and that are in there. They're not so top heavy. And they got some good, they got AP rankings, coaches rankings as well. But this is where I like to delve a little bit deeper into the numbers.
And real quick on the Big 12, it's a strange year because you have Texas and Oklahoma. They're both playing well, but they're on their way out. So this is like a super year for the Big 12 because you still have Texas and Oklahoma. And then you have the newcomers like Houston and BYU were playing great. So this could be the strongest Big 12. It's a one-shot deal, but this is a really super conference that is not going to stay like this for another year. So I thought that was interesting.
There will be some shape shifting there. It'll look like the X-Men. You got people changing and flip-flopping and conference changes and all of those good things. But Big 12. All right, you're number 2. Big fella, you're number 2.
Number 2 is close, but I'm gonna stick with Ken Palm and go with the SEC. I just have not been super impressed with the Big 10. I think Purdue's the only real elite team. The SEC. I see Tennessee's just they have 3 losses, but we've talked about how ridiculous their schedule's been. Alabama's also has 3 losses that they've played. A really tough schedule. They've lost to Purdue and Ohio State, but Alabama, I know they have at least a couple wins. They do have a win over Oregon, and they were impressed with that loss to Purdue because they were right there with Purdue. So I think Alabama can be a top team. And then Auburn, really impressed by them. By the way, they handled Indiana. I think that was a key part. At least maybe there's some recency bias, but seeing Auburn destroy Indiana like that, I think both those teams see themselves as tier 1 or tier 2 teams in their own conference, and Auburn winning that battle the way they did, that puts the SEC over the Big 10 for me. And the Big 10 might have better depth, but then you also have Kentucky and Texas A&M with that road win over Ohio State. And Mississippi State's played pretty well. They had a shocking loss to Southern, but other than that, they've been strong. So I give the SEC a slight edge.
I agree with you. Again, not looking at the top of the conference. I look at those teams that are underneath. Who's lying beneath.
Arkansas too. Arkansas beat Duke.
Yes,
Duke struggled, but I like Arkansas too.
See, there you go, AY. That's why I told you, man. You are that guy. You are him. Who pulls Arkansas out of this? I mean, Arkansas right now is not in that Ken Palm top 25. But they should be. I mean, that team is really
They've also played a brutal schedule. Lost to North Carolina, lost to Oklahoma, lost to Memphis. So,
it's a team Memphis lost. I'm a little. I don't know much about Memphis, so I can't really comment on them. But those other 2 teams are really good losses. But that SEC team has the conference has been coming along from a basketball standpoint. Many people have known the SEC, of course, for football. Where you got, you got your Alabamas, you got your Georgias, and all of those, and people blow up and hear all those things because you got the huge coaches like Nick Saban, who I am a huge fan of. So, Coach Saban, been loving you since you were with the Miami Dolphins, and even before that when you were at LSU. But we're not going to talk. This is a Big 10 spotlight, so we're not going to talk about the SEC. But I agree with you 100%. I think the SEC is the second best conference right now. But I think the Big 10, which we are covering, is a very close second, a very close third. I mean, to that SEC right now. Of course, there's not very many teams that are going to beat a Purdue. I don't care which conference you're in, you're just not going to do it. Illinois is a hard out for whomever you're going to play. Wisconsin, even though they just lost, these are teams that I believe will get better as time goes on. Even covering Illinois, and I watched them play, they beat a very, very good FAU team. And then you turn around and, after a 3-game swing on the weekend and one night in your bed, and then you're flying early morning out to Knoxville, and they ended up losing that game, but it was a competitive game throughout. Just couldn't get guys to make, you got to make baskets in basketball. And they did not do that. So it was a really tough loss. But I do like kind of those, I guess the Big Ten in that middle section is not as strong as it has been in the past. But Ohio State is a very good team. Indiana is a very good team, even though they just got blasted by 30 by Auburn. Northwestern is going to be a tough out for anyone. I don't care who it is that is stepping up to them. Michigan is starting to show, some like they're coming alive. Now, I mean, we'll see if they continue to grow as a team. But and then Iowa. Iowa's always going to be a tough out for people because of their ability to be able to put the ball in the basket. Defensively, sometimes you got to question, but Fran McCaffrey has always been an offensive wizard, and they're going to get that. They're going to get better. And Nebraska's been a surprise, even though they got blown out in their little, rivalry, in-state rivalry. But Nebraska's pretty doggone good. So you have multiple teams in the Big Ten that are in that top 25, but are in that top 30, top 40. As well as the other conferences. But I think that Big Ten conference is right there. They're right there, and I think these teams will get better as time goes on, but so does everyone. So we'll see how that continues as they move forward.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the Big Ten. When I was going through the conference rankings, I think I like the Big East a little better just because I see them as having 3 national title contenders. Yep. But when you get below that, you have Villanova and Xavier are teams that have nice wins, but also really head-scratching losses. And so you could say that about some of the Big Ten teams in the middle tier. I think Purdue's on a tier of their own. I have them as the cream of the crop. And we already talked about how good they looked against Alabama. And I liked how they were able to win a game that was fast-paced like that when we know they want to slow it down, grind it out with Zach Edey. Mm-hmm. And getting Braden Smith a game like that out of him was a really good sign for Purdue. And then I think Illinois, they have a chance. Your Illini have a chance to get to that next tier to maybe challenge Purdue for a conference title. But just a couple of questions about them. What are they getting out of the point guard spot? It doesn't seem like they have a true point guard. I see Terrence Shannon as a good scoring guard. And then Marcus Damask, we saw how great he was against FAU. If he could just channel that version of Marcus Damask more often, he fell off a little bit against a really good defensive team in Tennessee. And he's someone, I talked about him being a point forward, but he did not play well against Tennessee. He's been inconsistent in his first season as a major conference player. And then Ty Rodgers plays the point sometimes, but he's someone who tends to disappear in games. I don't know how much they can get out of him every game. So I really want to see Illinois just figure out that point guard spot before I move them into the top tier. And I also have Wisconsin lurking. Wisconsin had the puzzling loss to Providence, and then they played really, really well. They beat Michigan State on the road, which doesn't look as good, but they also have the big home win against Marquette, the big neutral win against Virginia. Then they went out to Arizona. They got destroyed. Arizona had an unreal shooting game.
Yeah, they did.
Arizona's strong. I would have liked to see Wisconsin hang around a little bit more in that game, but certainly no shame in losing to that Arizona team that is the AP number 1 team in the country. And let's finish out my tier 2 now. I have Northwestern mainly because of that win over Purdue, because other than that, we have not seen a lot of premier opponents for Northwestern. Their one loss is to pretty good SEC team in Mississippi State. Other than that, Not a lot of challenging games on their schedule, but I love the shooting that they can deliver with Bowie, with Berry, with the Princeton transfer Langborg. They are just going to give teams all sorts of problems with the way they can shoot from long range. And then the iffy team I have in my tier 2, Indiana. I like that they're able to beat Michigan because I still see Michigan as a team with a lot of potential, but Indiana against the 2 top tier national teams on their schedule, they have been outclassed. I was at the Connecticut game where they were blown out by 20, and then they go and they lose to Auburn by almost 30. And you have to wonder, they have a win over Maryland, but I'm really low on Maryland despite them beating. They barely beat Penn State at home. Other than that, Maryland has been really, really disappointing. So would like to see more quality wins from Indiana, but certainly they have talent. And also with Xavier Johnson out, Gabe Cupps played pretty well against Auburn. He's a freshman who, like you said, the freshman becomes sophomore. He has to grow up really quickly now with Xavier Johnson out. If they can get him back and get more out of their backcourt, that's a team that can improve. Okay. So, let's talk about the bottom half, if you will, of the conference. Who do you have? Some teams down there that have disappointed you?
Surprising teams down there. But first, let's go back. So, did you rate the Big East above the Big Ten? So you have the Big Ten.
Just a little bit.
AY, see, I give you all of this love, and I tell you you're him, and then you say something like that. Then that lets me know that you're not him. No.
Oh, no. I lost it. I was him for about 15 minutes.
Yes, you were him for 15 minutes. No, I will say this, though. I do like the Big East Conference. I think the 3 teams.
I'm a New York guy. I have a soft spot for the Big
East. There you go. I figured it out. There's a little location bias in there. But, okay, I get it. I understand. The top 3 teams in the Big East are all title contenders. UConn, Marquette. I think they are all in that position where they have a chance to be that team. And Marquette, when I watched them handle North Carolina, and North Carolina is pretty doggone good. Of course, Marquette came into Champaign and beat Illinois, even though Illinois was right there. And really, in my opinion, and this is not my biasness, without the 4 consecutive turnovers where Marquette went down and scored, and then Illinois was trying to claw back, they were ahead when that little string happened, and they just weren't able to crawl back into that. And then, as you mentioned, Creighton went into and beat Nebraska, beat them pretty handily. But again, we're talking about conferences. Those 3 teams, really, really good. But then you seep down into the conference, and yes, there are other teams in the Big East that are good. But even Ken Palm was like, you get down to number 30, then you have, you got Villanova. Then you got to go way down, and you got Xavier and Providence. So that's all I'm saying. I understand where you're going. I understand you got a little location bias in there, but I got to disagree with you a little bit on that. But let's move over, as you said. Forward.
Yeah, that'll be something to watch. Well, we can have our own little Big East Big Ten challenge.
Yes,
I'll be the heel here. Yeah, we'll monitor that. I think some of those teams like Providence and Xavier and Villanova have a lot of potential. But yeah, let's move on to the Big Ten now.
I agree. You mentioned the tiers. I agree with you. Purdue right now, I believe, is in a class by themselves. I think even though with that loss to Northwestern, sometimes you play against teams that just have your number. And that's kind of the situation. Purdue was number 1 last year. They go into Chrysler. They get beat by Northwestern. This year, number 1, go into Evanston again, get knocked out of there. And probably one of the best games I've seen all year, that Northwestern-Purdue game when they beat Purdue. So Purdue is definitely, I believe, still in a class by themselves. I like that Northwestern team. Chris Collins, who I've known for many years. As a matter of fact, I got a quick little note for you. I was his senior year host on his official visit to the University of Illinois. So that tell you how far
I love
we
that.
go
I
back. He
love
came
that.
in, he was a 17-year-old snot-nosed kid, and now he's about to take Northwestern, I believe, back to the NCAA tournament.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The first coach to do it there, and now he's going to take them back again in another run. But I would have to go, and I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. I'll put Purdue. Purdue is kind of in a class by themselves, so I won't put them in there. Let's go Northwestern, Illinois, Wisconsin are in that next tier. About, I'll say with themselves, and I'm on the fence with Indiana. I really like Indiana, so it pains me to not put them in there because I love the makeup of their team. The big boys on the inside are going to win a lot of games for them. So, you know what? I'm just going to shove them in there. So we're going to go Indiana, Northwestern, Illinois, in that next tier.
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Ohio State. I'm going to put Michigan in there. And I know this may sound crazy because right now they're dead last in the Big Ten, but I'm putting Michigan State in there. You don't bet against Tom Izzo. You just don't. Those guys will get it. When you have a point guard like Tyson, you lean on those things. You talked about Illinois' point guard situation. I do not disagree with you. But as I was debating some friends last night about Illinois runs a motion offense. A true point guard is not really a necessity. So, from a coaching standpoint, just not a necessity. Do you have a leader on the floor that gets guys in their position and where they need to go? Yeah, they have that. Do their offense run smoothly, yes, most of the time. And a lot of that is they just have to get out of their own selfish ways sometimes. But they've done a great job of finding people that are hot and kind of doing an NBA-centric type way of playing where, okay, you're bigger and stronger than he is, then we're going to go to you. So I do not disagree with that. But Michigan State, back to them. I would have to put them in that third tier, I guess that is, because Purdue's by themselves. I have to put them in there. I know, respect, and love what Tom Izzo does. To bring all of those players back and then add what you've added to it, I do believe they're going to turn around what they're doing. I mean, right now, 0-2 in the Big Ten, just coming off a tough loss. I'd still have to put them in there. And maybe people might say I'm a little Tom Izzo biased, and I would agree with that 100% because I am. But I think he turns it around. Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa are kind of, even though Iowa's 0-2 right now, again, Fran McCaffrey is one of the best coaches that I've seen coach. He'll get those guys turned back around. And I'm just not sold right now, even though they're playing really well at 8-2. I'm not sold on Nebraska yet. I'm not sold on Minnesota yet at 8-3 overall, and they're playing really well. I think Maryland is better than what they have shown. And, and then I think they're in a tier by themselves, and this is probably too many tiers. And then and then Penn State and Rutgers are in a tier by themselves because I cannot figure those guys out. And I know you are the Penn State guy, but at 6-3 Rutgers, 5-5 Penn State, I don't know if they know who they are.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure it out. They both did win on Saturday.
Yeah, and they won on Saturday. So this is why, I have to put the Big Ten above the Big East as far as conferences, because I think the middle and lower middle of the Big Ten might be better than I think they are. They might be. And I'm waiting to see. I have not seen enough of them to say so. But if I look at their overall records, and granted they have not played, the scorchers of NCAA basketball just yet, they're gonna be able to prove themselves, and with the possibility of winning a lot of quad one wins within the Big Ten. And then this weekend coming up, as we talked about with some of these teams.
Yeah. Yeah, before we get to the weekend real quick, where I disagree with you, we agree on a lot. And that tier 3, I have Michigan State. I have Ohio State, who would be higher if they had not blown a huge lead to my Nittany Lions. And then Michigan, I still like Michigan's talent with McDaniel and Kumwa a lot, but they had that tough loss to Indiana. And he did beat Iowa. Michigan just does not have a ton of quality wins right now, but I like their potential. Nebraska, they have a lot of wins over non-quality opposition, and they get the huge win over Michigan State, huge for that program and Fred Hoiberg. So I have them at the bottom of tier 3. Tier 4, I have Iowa in there. I am not a believer in Iowa this year, even though they do have a history under Fran McCaffrey of playing really good and getting up and down the floor, scoring a lot of points, and being an NCAA tournament team. 3 blowout losses in a row. And that game, they only lost by 10 against Michigan, and they were trailing in the second half. Michigan came out like gangbusters in the second half and really led by double digits for most of it. It took a flurry at the end just for Iowa to get within 10. I'm really worried about their defense, and I just do not think they have the shooters this year to get their way out of it. Ben Krikke carrying that offense. I don't think they're getting enough out of the backcourt, and this is the team that historically under Fran McCaffrey has gotten a lot of scoring out of their three-point shooting, their backcourt. I don't know if it's good enough this year, and the 3 straight blowouts have me really worried about Iowa. And then I have Maryland at the very bottom. Even though they beat Penn State, it was at home, and it was in Maryland's building in overtime. So I think Penn State can win that game on a neutral court or a home court. And also Penn State has a quality win over Ohio State now. So that puts them slightly above Maryland. And who else did I want to mention? Minnesota. They have won a couple games against weak opposition without Dawson Garcia, and they have that big win where they lost Dawson Garcia, the big win over Nebraska. So I have Minnesota 3rd from the bottom, and I have Iowa 4th from the bottom, and then I have Rutgers slightly above Iowa. Rutgers just going to have to grind it out. Still not very impressed with how they can score the ball, but they did.
They can't. That's the problem.
They did. I think they're going to score more because of their freshmen. They got a good game from Gavin Griffiths, who's a top 50 player in this class. And they had another freshman who stepped up against Seton Hall. And that was Noah Fernandez, the UMass transfer, had a nice game. And they also got they had another freshman step up against Seton. Jamichael Davis. Jamichael Davis played well in that game. So I think if Rutgers can get some more out of these freshmen, they can score a little bit more and rise up in the Big Ten. All right, so yeah, let's go. This Saturday, we got some, I think, 4 premier games this Saturday. Which one are you looking forward to the most?
The one I'm looking forward to the most, I'm sure, is the same one that you're looking forward to. Arizona, Purdue.
Yes.
I mean,
oh man, blockbuster.
This is going to be an absolute, what the old folks used to call it, an absolute slobber knocker.
Yes.
This is going to be a game of who's, and I don't think it's even going to come down to the interior guys, because Zach Edey, I believe, is going to dominate this game as he always does. How can Purdue's guards, as I just praised Lawyer and Smith, how are they going to play against the length and the athleticism of the Arizona guards? That's what's going to really show. Can they come out and run their offense effective enough against the Arizona Wildcats? That's what's going to be the key to this game. Arizona is a very good team. They love to get up and down the court. Can Purdue control the tempo? Can they control how, can they rebound with this Arizona team? And I think those are the things that are going to really be able to stand out. Once Arizona brought over Caleb Love. Caleb Love was a beast in North Carolina. I really like him. How does can Ballo and Krivas deal with Zach Edey? I mean, there's going to be a lot of intrigue into seeing how these things take place. But the team that can control the tempo, the team that can rebound the basketball, if Lawyer and them can run their offense effective enough against the length of this Arizona team, can they do that? If they do that, they win. If they don't do that, they don't win. I mean, and it's that plain and simple.
Yeah, Purdue has a chance to get back in the number 1 spot if they can knock off Arizona. It is in Indianapolis, so you expect Purdue to have an advantage there. And yeah, I like a big problem for Wisconsin was Ballo getting dunk after dunk after dunk on the pick and roll, on the high-low action. So Edey is someone who can make it a little more difficult for Arizona to score. Like you said, there's so much talent on both sides. This is a game that could be the best game of the non-conference overall with the way we expect it to go down. I'm thrilled to see that game. And then you also have Kansas visiting Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
This is a chance for Indiana to get that big win that they have been lacking, but Kansas is such a tough opponent. Maybe you get Khalil Ware neutralizing Hunter Dickinson, but then Kansas can also come at you with DeJuan Harris and with McCullough and with the other players they have in the backcourt. And I talked about Indiana's backcourt. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with Kansas, but in Assembly Hall, you always have to give IU a chance. Malik Reneau is going to have a huge game in order for Indiana to pull that upset. And then
it's going to have to almost be, I'm sorry, it's almost going to have to be almost a perfect game for Indiana. Better yet, let's jump back. Just want to mention a couple.
Sure.
You talked about the Ballo getting the dunk after dunk. Yeah. The way Arizona runs their pick and roll, it's good. It's going to really be interesting to see how Arizona does against the drop coverage, because it's really a drop coverage. You're not going to have Zach Edey extending where Ballo can get those rolls to the basket. And then Purdue's better with their weak side help. Can Arizona knock down enough threes? Because you're not going to get that clear roll and lob. You may get 1 or 2 of those, and then you're not going to penetrate down the basket against Zach Edey. And again, Purdue does a really good job in their help defense. So, they take a lot of those things away that are Arizona's strengths, but Arizona just got a bunch of horses. Are my horses better than yours? So that's going to be interesting to see. But I agree with you 100%. Indiana has to play almost a perfect game. Kansas is good. Kansas is really damn good. And I don't care where they're playing. They can be on the road, at home. Does Indiana have a chance to win? Yes, because I think Indiana is really good. I think Hunter Dickinson, depending on the aggressiveness that he comes out and plays with, has the advantage over the young front court of Indiana. But the downside of that is just like when Kansas came and played in the exhibition in Champaign. Indiana's defended him. They know how he plays. They know what he can do. They know how to take away some of the things he does. Does that hurt Kansas? Because Kansas plays heavily right now through Hunter Dickinson. And I think if they can spread things out a little bit more, meaning spread the wealth and other guys can get a little bit more involved, I think that'll help Kansas. But this is I like the size of this front court from Indiana against the size of the front court from Kansas. How well those guards play will determine how this game goes. But we got a precursor to next year's Big Ten. Now, they don't play next year, but they will eventually. Ohio State, UCLA. What do you think about that one?
I think Ohio State is going to be glad to get out on the West Coast, get as far away from State College as possible, and try to get that bad taste out of their mouths. This is a team, Ohio State, if they had just hung on to that lead against Penn State and not turn the ball over so much, we would be thinking about them maybe as being a sneaky top-tier team in this Big Ten. But instead, now they have to go out to UCLA, and they have a tough battle on their hands. But I give Ohio State a decent chance, although it's not in UCLA. It's in Atlanta. So we'll be pretty neutral, which is a leg up for Ohio State. So yeah, with the scoring guards, we saw them tail off in that second half. They just couldn't put away Penn State, but Marcus Thornton is maybe one of the most underrated players in the Big Ten.
Agreed.
And they're going to rely on that backcourt a lot. They have the freshman Middleton, who's starting to get more involved. and I have not seen a lot of UCLA, but you figure it's going to be tough for Ohio State. They haven't played a ton of super strong competition. Ohio State, they did beat Minnesota. They have the big win over Alabama. They also lost to Texas A&M at home. That's a team that they're, according to Ken Pom, they should be on even footing with, and they lost at home. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a huge indicator of where Ohio State is as we get into conference play, because that loss at Penn State, that was really, really surprising, especially when it looked like they had that game totally in hand. And you look at UCLA, they're looking for a quality win because they've lost to Marquette, they've lost to Gonzaga, both on neutral floors. They went all the way to Villanova and lost. So they're a team that if they don't win against Ohio State, they are going to have their work cut out from them. And they're going to have to do really well in the Pac-12 in order to boost their NCAA resume. Who do you give the edge to in this game?
I would have to give, well, first of all, Mick Cronin. Let's talk about Mick. Midwestern guy, of course, was at Cincinnati forever, had that team playing big, strong, physical. And so this team is going to be competitive. They have size, they have length, they have athleticism. They're playing on a neutral court. It's really hard to say. Let me first of all say that. But I might have to give the edge to UCLA, the new addition to the Big Ten. But they are a very solid team. And as we said, if Ohio State, you have to beat those opponents you're supposed to beat. They should have beaten Penn State. Penn State's not as good as they are. And that's just the bottom line.
Yep.
And the problem right now is UCLA is struggling with scoring the basketball. I mean, they're, 69, 70 points a game. Ohio State defends. How do you deal with that? But you mentioned they have some big game experience, playing Marquette, playing Gonzaga. Yes, now they lost both of those games, but this is a team that comes out and can play physical and are pretty doggone good. So it's really going to come down to the guard play of Ohio State, as you mentioned. Do those guys come out and really take over and play aggressively? Because the guards of of UCLA, I don't know if they're that physical. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. So now all you have to do is really limit and take away their drives to the basket. They got 3 or 4 guys that are averaging close, 10 points or more a game. So they try to spread the wealth, but how deep is their lineup? So, I know I said I give it to UCLA, but I'm talking myself.
You're starting to think about Ohio State. Yeah.
Myself into giving this to Ohio State. Yeah. So I'm going to have to lean back over to Bucky and think that they may have the advantage in this game, but I think it's going to be really competitive.
Yeah. I'm looking at this UCLA team. Adam Bona, the big man, is going to be a key factor because he's someone who can get them some easy baskets. Although Ohio State has a veteran big man like Zed Key, who he's not going to just back down, and he's not going to get back down in the paint very easily. So Ohio State, I like their chances in the paint, and it's going to depend on Sebastian Mack, the freshman guard for UCLA. He had this great game against Marquette where he scored 25 points. But other than that, he's been inconsistent, and he has been not shooting the ball well. That game at Villanova, he only went 3 for 10.
Yeah.
And he also had a 2 for 10 in a win over UC Riverside. So he's someone who can be an X factor if they cannot allow Bona to get easy buckets and Sebastian Mack keeps shooting the ball consistently. Ohio State could get a big win here. I'm starting to dig their chances. Okay, so yeah. All right, one more. It is going to be a game in Detroit that Michigan State really needs if they want everyone in America to think of themselves as a contender. They will play Baylor, and they are, I don't know if the line's out, but I'm gonna make them an underdog because Baylor has been really strong so far. It's another team that I haven't seen a lot out of, but I've seen enough from Michigan State to say they are going to have a tough time, and it's going to take a big effort from Michigan State to beat Baylor. And one thing I didn't like when they went into that game in Lincoln was they relied too much down the stretch. They relied too much on Tyson Walker. And this is what happened in the loss to James Madison. They want Tyson Walker to do everything down the stretch. They don't have, I mean, it should be AJ Hoggard. We should see Malik Hall played well in that game, but he did not step up down the stretch. Walker hit a couple big shots, but then they get another big possession. And I think Hoggard passed it to Walker on the logo with the shot clock winding down, and they end up just jacking up a 35-foot shot with no chance of going in. And it was just an indication of how Michigan State in crunch time, they need these other guys to step up, or they are going to be, or they don't have a chance against Baylor. Now, they have we talk about Michigan State's talent. They have so much returning talent. But right now, they need more guys stepping up. Baylor has a win over Auburn they opened the season with. They have also beaten Florida, Seton Hall. Now, Baylor hasn't been super tested yet, but their offense on Ken Pom ranks as second. So they are a team who can put the ball in the basket for sure. They have some really good three-point shooters on this team. And that is, and if Michigan State does not get their offense where it needs to be, they're going to have trouble catching up.
Well, that's it. And that's one of the things. I agree with you 100%. And I think this is a game, to be honest, where Michigan State probably surprises. And why do I say that? If they do not turn the ball over, which Michigan State has a habit of doing, they defend what Baylor does really well. They defend the three-point line. And, you know, they historically have been really good defenders of the three-point line. Let me put that key word in there. What they have done also historically has been a really good rebounding team. And this is one of the areas where, you know, I won't say Baylor is great at. What else does Michigan State do that is difficult for Baylor? Transition baskets. Michigan State really gets out. They get out fast and they try to find easy baskets. But I do agree with you. Hoggard, Malik, those guys have to step up and be, you know, I'm not going to say Batman and Robin. They got to be more of a Justice League, because right now, you know, Tyson Walker is Superman and ain't nobody else running with him. Those guys got to step up and play better. The problem with Michigan State, and one of the problems, and where I see this could be an issue for them, is interior scoring. Michigan State has to find better ways to get easy baskets. They got to penetrate. They got to get the ball in and let the big fella throw him some lobs and let him dunk around the basket, because that's pretty much what you're going to get from him. I have to give the nod to Baylor for this game. Yeah. With the hopes that down the line, of course, with us being a Big Ten podcast, Michigan State's going to have to step up. Those guys are going to have to step up and be the players that they are, especially Hoggard and Malik. And you know, they got to get back to playing Sparty basketball, because right now they're not doing it. They're not playing very physical. They don't look very emotionally in tuned. I mean, anytime you see the coach over there doing more yelling than the players on the floor, there's a bit of a problem. So there's a disconnect that they have to get together. But you got to take your hat off right now to Baylor and give them the nod in this game. I'm sure this will probably there'll be at least a 7 to 8 point favorite in this game, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think Cohen Carr is another player. He has not played super often against the top competition, but he's someone maybe down the line you'd like to hope in this Baylor game, but maybe down the line this season he steps up because he can jump and catch lobs and rebound. He's someone who can get some more minutes and give this team a lift, maybe from an energy standpoint. He can block shots, just give them a lift. But he is still a true freshman, so he's still coming along. But he's someone to look out for if Michigan State is going to pull this upset. Michigan State has been really bad. Besides Tyson Walker, they've been pretty awful shooting the three-point shot, and that is in stark contrast to Baylor, who is number one in shooting the three-point shot. So if Michigan State, they really have to at least make it close in that category, or they could get run off the floor in Detroit. So That is a solid Saturday slate. During the week, it's been mostly quiet. I think it's finals week for some of these schools. They're taking tests. They're playing against a couple of tomato cans. So, but that all sets up for Saturday. We are going to find out a lot on Saturday, and we'll talk about Big Ten basketball all season long as we approach the renewal of conference play in the new year. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave a nice review on Apple or Spotify as we continue to move in to get closer to conference play. And I am Aaron York, and you are Deon Thomas, and we will.
Really?
Yeah. Well, you're Deon. I am Deon. I'm Ron Burgundy. We will see you next time on Big Ten Spotlight. Cannot wait to see what happens this weekend. Peace out.
Peace out.